Well, you have one of those days, you got yourself a bike, a used one, or one that you had for a while and has internal routing, and you got messed up. What I'm talking about internal routing is when the cables and the housing go into the frame and pop out the other end. And this is still something that goes through even to the current bikes and then on some, therefore, until they're all fully electric, shifting that is. So anything backing more than 4 years ago, you're going to possibly have, or even current, some of this internal routing. Well, this particular guy is one piece of housing that's all the way through. So this was a little bit easier to deal with. But let's talk about the scary bit. The scary bit is not this Trek, but a Klein that I have, and I'm going to show you how to unfortunately have to fix the brake cable if it drops or the sleeve drops within the top tube. After this. Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles. Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with the guy. Hi, I'm Justin, the guy. Obviously, I have a garage shop. Taking scary out of used bikes one bike at a time. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Alrighty. Welcome back to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging with a guy. I got a question from a subscriber, and I'm going to address this particular issue. So he found one of my Klein videos and showed the internal routing, and he was like, oh man, I have the same frame or similar Klein and I like the video, but what happens when you don't have the sleeve no longer in the brake cable area? It's a painful bit. This particular type of bike with internal sleeves from Klein, I would say was in production for a good 10, maybe 15 years that they did the internal. So what you got is the brake stop goes here on the right side of the frame, then whoop, it magically pops out on this end over here. Okay, back in the day, going back in the 90s, when these were new, this looked exactly like this, a big old gaping hole, and there was no stop. And it was kind of like, well, what the heck? But you dig around your parts box when you're building this up, and you have this little grommet. And this little grommet is something that you'll have to press fit in to put that housing stop in there. And the reason why I have this frame is it has a little bit of a carbon defect, and I'm going to at some point cut that out and patch it. But for the time being, this is an excellent example. And I believe I kept the ferrule or housing stop, if you don't mind me digging through my parts here. It's got to be in here somewhere. This is going to be a thing where if you don't have one, this might be pretty hard to get one in stock. Oh, where'd you go? Oh, I know you're in here some. Oh, there you are. All right. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Saved at last. Okay, here is the guy. You can probably find these somewhere. It might be a problem solver type thing, but what it is that's your housing stop, and this one's kind of boogered up. Not boogered up per se, it's kind of like a little bit of glue on there or something. I don't know what's on there, but it looked like it was ridged, and this presses in there. Okay, so what do you do when you lost your cable in there? Well, you got to get this guy out. How are you going to do that? Very carefully. Let me show you a couple tricks. I've done this before. Well, thank goodness last time I'd done this was in the 90s, so memory's going to come back to me real soon, so watch this flashback. Okay, in order to get that cable to come through on this other end, you're going to have to get this guy out. There lies the issue, because these are pressed in like so, and I'm not going to press it in. And sometimes they're pressed in by force, so they're tapped in. So you have this little lip here. So this is what I suggest doing, or at least trying. And there's a good chance you might chip up the paint. I like to tape off the area as close as you can, so you're not gonna get that file or chipped up area. At least protect the frame a little bit if you can in that area there, like so. So how I've gotten this out is, so you think about it, okay. You need to force this guy out. Can I get to the lip of this little guy? Probably not. So there lies a nice little trick, and it involves using a spoke. So let's find a spoke. Okay, so you have this guy and you have a spoke. What you're going to try to do is make yourself a little hook in on the end of that spoke. The J hook is going to be too fat to get in there. What you can do is you can file this down so you can get that little hook port. Reason being is what you want to do is you get that hooked in there, then you have something you can tug on this. And then you can clamp something on the outside of this, like a slide hammer, right? And you can slide hammer this guy out slowly. Hopefully you can get it to budge. What you could also do is put a little bit of graphite on that spot, or a little bit of something to lube it to kind of, around that edge. So when you have to slide hammer that out, it has like something to maybe will break free that looseness to it. The other thing is you can get a punch and try to get underneath that, but that's where you're going to end up chipping the frame. So the slide hammer technique with the spoke is the best option. Yeah, it's hard to get a grip on this. So what I would do is kind of like file this guy down. See if we can do this. Put it in a vise if you have one. And you want to be able to basically hook the inside of that cable stop. I don't know if I'll have enough oomph on this. Or you can take a grommet or a Dremel tool, whatever. You can try to get that to file down. So when you're going at it from this direction, you can get it to, or you can J-bend it on this side by using a vise. And this might be a good way to do it. So you don't want to get too far because you want to be able to get inside there with that little angle. So it's just going to be the very tip of it. Then you bend it down like so. And hopefully you can get it enough in there so it actually hooks in. And on the threaded, use the threaded spoke. And yeah, you're going to be tractioning a spoke, so, but you want to get that in there to catch. Then you can use the slide hammer technique on that. So close. So this is where you get creative. Take a nice little hammer. Hopefully it doesn't break off. So you can get it to get in that. And keep manipulating it until you can get it in there, basically, what the trick is. So if you need to file it, so you can get the little bit of a boom. So made myself that little hook, and that's where you're going to go in there and get the hook in there. That's going to give you the best option to try to smack that out. So that's one way of doing it. The other one is preceding it, tapping it with a punch, trying to get underneath here, or a flat like chisel type, very small, to kind of wedge that out. You will not be able to get your needle nose over this. And you don't want to damage this, remember, because they're super hard to find. So that's not going to be good. So back to the frame. So if you get it out in the first try, good for you, but most likely it's going to be an hour or two fussing and getting in there and trying to, get that edge on there. You can poke it. You can make this other end so you can kind of, eventually it will give. Eventually it'll pop out. And actually, that's how I got this one out, because it didn't have a cable in there. So before you put this back in, you got to run your cable. And that's where you can use the magnet trick. All right, so once you get that grommet out, all right, you got to get yourself a really good strong magnet to really draw this cable in. And I like to kind of measure it with my finger here on the backside so I kind of know where I'm going to be at. So when I start threading it from this end, I can kind of grab that cable and get it to pop out like so. So you can just throw a cable in here and put a sleeve in, but the sleeve is not going to stay because those stops don't support a sleeve internally. So it's really not necessary to do the sleeve. But when you do this, you want to have the longer sleeve when you switch it out. So like on the previous video, that's what you want to do. So when you're at this point, and you got the cable ran, so let's just say you have go ahead and get your housing all cut and everything and the cable routed before you get to this point. And then when you get to this point, you're ready with your cable, then what you want to do is, this has like a bullet look, so you want to go through the tip of the bullet, so it's going in here. And then you kind of set that in there. Then go ahead and have your brake on there and the piece of housing, and go ahead and string it up tight. And then, this is what we did back in the day, is we'd line this up and make sure it was straight, and then put a dash of lube or something on here to help for it to guide in there. Then we'd use the power of the brake compression to force this in. And make sure you get this to force in flush. If you really need to, I'd not recommend it, but if you need to, you can take a punch and a tap, but you got to keep the cable in there because you don't want to drop that. And tap that in there, or if you're having a hard time, it's like a two-person job, somebody holding the brake down really tight to put tension on this, and just take that like a punch and kind of tap it and help it aid in there. Eventually it'll pop in there, and then you're set. I came across one of these bikes that I bought used, and it was sitting here just like this, just kind of chilling and not pressed in. The thing is somebody could have really hit the rear brake real hard and forced that in, and all of a sudden they would have no brakes or be very minimal brakes. So that's something you want to be making sure this is contact. Then once that pops in, then you readjust your brake and set. And that will be, it'll be preset and ready to go. So, and when you go to replace that cable again, then you'll have to pull it out like this. Then you take that sleeve that I have before, slide it through longer on both sides, then you can pull the cable out like so. But to get these little boogers out, you're going to have to get very creative. And that cut spoke slide, usually, got something in there, and you got to really pull it and tug it and kind of do the hammer technique. Also, Park Tool has this pick that has a little hook to it. You might be able to get that hook, but you'll be damaging that hook. So I suggest using a spoke to try to get that. But yeah, it's something that you got to work out to be able to access, to have this gap here, because to try to thread this cable through this hole with a magnet, it's almost virtually impossible. So you're going to have to take this guy out. Hopefully that clears up some mud, and if it happened, let the force be with you, because you're going to need it. A lot of good bike juju to make that work, but once you get it down, you'll realize, oh, you'll never do that again. And if you do come buy a frame or what have you that doesn't have that, you're going to have to pull this grommet out to be able to run that cable. And make sure you try to keep this intact, because it'd be really hard to find a replacement. So, Or if you're going to run, this doesn't have hydraulics, but if you're going to run kind of like just a one piece of housing all the way through, then you can pull both of these guys out and have that one piece of housing go all the way through the frame. That's another option too, which is not as pretty, but it can work. So there's some things to help you out with the nice little Klein. Oh yeah, I got to fix the little cable or bottle mount. Now it's part of this way project. Poor thing, needs some help, needs some love. So anyway, next time from the garage, have a good day.